I think we had a lot of really interesting points that we just talked about there for part one. Uh, Real quick, if you had to choose, what would you say that your favorite ant species is that you keep right now or that you sell?
Yeah, so my personal colony, there's probably not a good one answer to that. So, like my favorite colony, of course, I've got a 12-year-old colony that's Formica subsericea. So they're just, you know, being around and having an ant colony with you for that long is just definitely something cool. We'll see how long she lives. So it's the queen that's been around for that long. So then the other one, I'm really looking forward to the future of seeing one species. They're honeypot ants. They're not the biggest ones, but they're a yellow ant species. They're called Myrmecocystus navajo. They're just a really, really pretty ant. The queens have a very specific way of moving around. They just look intent. I don't know how to really describe it. Just through my eyes, when I'm used to seeing different ants, a lot of them move around like in a reaction to something, like their vibration on the table makes them scared, so they start running around, or you open it up and the airflow causes them to be alarmed at something. But whenever I watch this particular queen ants, it just seems that they have a lot of personality. I guess is like they're their own individual. Even though ants, you would never think that ants have that individual personality that's different than another. I just find them very interesting. So that's usually what I'm into with ants is ant behavior. So it's really fun to see the colonies that have different types of ants within the same colony. That's called polymorphism. Um, so you've got different versions of ants in the same colony, like a major worker, a media worker, a minor worker, a queen, and with the honeypot ants, you have repletes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those are, but they're a different type of ant that hangs from the ceiling their whole life and stores food for the colonies. They look like a little hanging Christmas ornament. And so you've got so many different personalities within that same colony. And I just find that particular ant fascinating to watch. So,
So
long
do
answer.
these colonies, do they kind of self-regulate their size, or do you run into issues with them getting really overpopulated in certain enclosures, and at some point you might be kind of struggling to find an enclosure that's going to be large enough for them, or is that kind of a species by species thing?
I wish they did self-regulate sometimes. I mean that would be amazing because part of the biggest fight for me is like you'll have somebody order something. Oh, my colony's getting so big. I need something quickly. And some of these bigger ones, it takes us a while to make. So if that was the situation, it would make my life a lot easier. Like I know certain fish don't ever overpopulate their or get too big for a space. They kind of scale up and down, but no, ants will quite literally grow in every spot that they possibly can inside of their habitat. And so as the colony gets bigger, you've got thousands of ants. They can literally, quite literally, expand the reach of their colony of what is a livable habitat just by sheerly growing. Like you'll have an ant colony that's filled up their formicarium, which is their nest area. So like there's no more room there, and then they'll start to live up in the area where you feed them, which is called an outworld or a foraging area. So you'll end up with a situation when you open up that lid to feed them, you're basically opening up part of their nest because there's so many ants up in that little foraging area. And that's where it gets really interesting in terms of how do you do that and not lose a bunch of ants. So
That seems kind of daunting, I guess. Like, how do you uh have new people coming into the hobby and kind of give them a solution or what to watch for or whatever like that, so you don't have people scared away by like, well, I don't want to have just an entire room full of ants one of these days. I only have so much space in my home.
So most ant colonies, ant species will have a population cap, you know, and there's not a lot of good solid research that will tell you exactly 5,000, you know, that's it. You'll have a few species that they'll tell you, and you'll kind of trust that what you're seeing in the wild is reflective of that. But you know, for example, an acorn ant colony, those are really small ants. They live inside of acorns, you know, as part of their natural habitat. So you can kind of envision that's not going to be too bad. You're not going to be taking up your whole room. And then you'll scale up from there. You go all the way up to like a fire ant, like a Solenopsis invicta, where that literally in a time span of a couple of years can take over an entire room, like a leafcutter ant as well. They can literally take up an entire building just because of their absolute overpopulation of an area. So you have to kind of practice either culling them. You know, you'll have to get rid of some of them through time. There's other ways to do that. You can slowly feed them at times where you see lots of brood and you just say, okay, they're growing too fast. Let me cut down on how much I feed them. And don't feed them twice a week, feed them once a week. Just expect that, you know, you'll maybe see some dead workers from time to time if you do that. But, you know, that can be necessary as part of pet ant keeping. Most people at this point, at this stage of where our hobby is, are not there yet. I would say I might be one of the few that I know of. I know of a couple other people who have big ant colonies. I don't think they're at the point where they're just ready to stop, like no more growth. I'm done. Like I have a couple colonies. I'm pretty much there at this point, but willing to you know, work something out with them as this year goes. I have to really like, I don't have any more room left or right. I'm going to have to build something up. So you're going to have to manage each colony ahead of time. Just do you want a colony that's going to potentially get 50,000 workers and could take up as much room as a table, like a coffee table in your room? I mean, that's what you're looking at with some of these ants. And then, you know, some much smaller, you know, like we have the Western harvester ant, for example, the Pogonomyrmex occidentalis. What the literature on them says about 5,000 is the capacity. So you're not looking too big in terms of that specific ant. And so, you know, for them, if you want to slow them down, and a lot of the other desert ant species, you can literally just turn off the heat. And so it's easier for some species to manage that type of situation. What happens when you turn off the heat with them is the brood just loses their ability to grow. And then the colony will go into like a stasis. So you can do that at room temperature. You can do it in a cooler environment, but you know, that's another way to kind of shut them down as far as growing too fast for your liking. But yeah, there's a problem of knowing your ants ahead of time. That's important.